All right, as we move over from the quarterbacks to the running backs here, we'll do the top 20 as well as we start with Matthew's top 10. Not much of a surprise who's number 1. Good old faithful there. Christian McCaffrey at number 1. Breece Hall, number 2. Yeah. Bijan Robinson, number 3. Jahmyr Gibbs, number 4. Saquon Barkley now with the Eagles at number 5. Jonathan Taylor at 6. Kyron Williams, who we will get to eventually, at 7. Josh Jacobs at 8, now with the Packers. Travis Etienne, of course, at number 9. Devon Achane at number 10. Matthew, very high on the leaps that both Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson can take this year.
Will Breece Hall be at the wedding, by the way?
Breece Hall will not attend the wedding.
Okay.
I'm sorry to report.
It's too bad.
I was too busy racking up PPR points.
Is that what it is? That makes
Connor
sense.
And Kristen's love.
That's fine. Whatever. He'll be at the next wedding.
Yes. The new wife.
The newer wife. Yeah, the newer wife, for sure. But look, I mean, I think this is all fairly standard. Like, we expect Breece Hall, who last year led all running backs in receptions last season, to continue that. We expect Aaron Rodgers to be there. We expect the offense to be better, the offensive line to be better for the Jets. They have more weapons in the passing game, and so even taking the Rodgers over all the quarterbacks they had last year out of it, taking that out of it, just the fact of the matter is that not only do you have to deal with Garrett Wilson, but now you got to deal with Mike Williams. You got, there's other weapons that you're going to have to deal with. Malachi Corley as well. You're going to have to deal with these guys in the passing game for the Jets, where that should open up some underneath stuff for Breece Hall as well, who's such a weapon in the passing game. He comes in at number 2. But to me, the most interesting thing here is Bijan Robinson, who gets to play and coached by not Arthur Smith. That's the most important thing.
Doesn't even really matter who is coaching.
No.
It's just not Arthur Smith.
It's not Arthur Smith.
NAS.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had 12 different games last year with 15 or more touches. Like, he averaged 18.1 fantasy points per game. That would have been running back 3 over a full season. That 18.1. 7 different games with 18 or more fantasy points. Only 3 running backs had more. 17% target share, 3rd highest among running backs. And again, that was all with one hand tied behind his back because of Arthur Smith. And so this is going to be a much more efficient offense under Kirk Cousins. It's going to obviously make Bijan Robinson a focal point. Cordero Patterson no longer there to vulture, 4 to 5 touches a game. Yes, they've got Tyler Algier, but make no mistake, like, Bijan Robinson, with Kirk Cousins, they're going to be in scoring position more often. And even if the touches even come down slightly, and I don't think there's any way they can, because Arthur Smith just used them so sporadically and weirdly, but the fact is that even if you give Bijan Robinson the exact same number of touches as he had last year, the offense is just going to be so much better under Kirk Cousins, and they'll be in scoring position more often, and they'll sustain drives longer, that Bijan Robinson, to me, is an easy pick at number 3. And if we're sitting here a year from now talking about how Bijan Robinson had the number 1 running back in fantasy year last season, a year from now, that wouldn't shock me. That's obviously within the range of outcomes.
Yeah, we spoke about this a few weeks ago, but if I could look ahead into a crystal ball and was able to see one box score from week 1 of the NFL season to inform decisions about drafting, about betting, it would be, how many carries does Bijan Robinson get, and how many snaps, what snap percentage does he play? Because if Bijan Robinson is going to be a workhorse back, then he's every chance to go past Christian McCaffrey and be the best player in fantasy. I think with Breece Hall, too, the sneaky thing there is just that the Jets' offensive line is now seemingly competent.
Totally
whereas
different.
It was not competent last year, and that combined with Aaron Rodgers, and also the fact that, like, his knee, it seems fine if he's going to get 38 carries against the Patriots in Week 18. So Breece Hall, who is, I think, potentially the most talented pure runner in the league, like, it still looks like Adrian Peterson out there, and with his speed, he was just, the fact that he was able to produce fantasy-wise despite his context last year, like, the sky's the limit for him this year, Connor.
Yeah, it really is. And the fact that it goes back to your point, Matthew, with Bijan, red zone opportunity. Yeah. I mean, the Jets were just horrendous in between the 20s last year. Horrendous. Yes, and now you expect more red zone opportunity where turn around, hand the ball to Breece Hall with a competent offensive line.
Breece Hall, by the way, 30-1 to an offensive player.
Pretty shocked by that.
Which is a bet that I like. That market should be very correlated to fantasy rankings, and the fact that he's the number 2 running back, he should be shorter than 30-1.
Especially because, by the way, if the Jets are good this year in the New York market, it's been so long, and if Breece Hall has the kind of season that he's capable of, then certainly he would be in there, because Offensive Player of the Year is usually a non-quarterback award.
It's become a non-quarterback award. Everyone's just decided this is for running backs and wide receivers, and MVPs for quarterbacks. And so Breece Hall, I mean, he should be second among running backs certainly for this award. And you could argue that, like, McCaffrey, as good as he was last year, he stayed fully healthy, which he doesn't typically do.
Right.
And then secondly, also, he's very dependent on these long runs early in the season, which dried up a little bit. He had the touchdowns. He's not going to score touchdowns every single game like he was for a stretch last year too. So Breece has as much ceiling as anyone.
Right after Breece and Bijan, number 4, Jahmyr Gibbs here, Matthew, where we'll see, I think, David Montgomery will still be a factor in fantasy, but Gibbs is going to have even a bigger impact on this offense in the pass game and run game.
They kept the training wheels purposely on him at the beginning of the year, and then Montgomery goes down, and they're like, well, they were sort of stuck with it. They have to. Lions still one of the better offensive lines in football. Dan Campbell obviously wants to use him. Tough fumble in the playoff game for Jahmyr Gibbs, but really that's literally one of the only knocks you can make about his rookie year. 5 different games with 24 or more fantasy points. Only Chris McCaffrey had more, and again, that was kind of in a part-time role. It's over 18 fantasy points per game. In games in which Jahmyr Gibbs got 12 touches, he averaged 18.2 fantasy points per game, and so we expect this Lions offense to be even better next year. Again, the fact that Ben Johnson is back helps Jahmyr Gibbs, helps that entire offense, helps that offensive line, and does feel like at this time last year we were talking about Montgomery over Gibbs at cost. But I don't think that's going to be the case here. Yes, Montgomery will be available. I still think Montgomery, by the way, is going to be a value this year because everyone's going to be all in on Jahmyr Gibbs, and rightfully so. But David Montgomery is still going to wind up with double-digit touches every single game and still going to be somebody that they use quite a bit around the goal line. And I think the usage you saw towards the end of the year and in the playoffs where Gibbs would get 2 touchdowns and Montgomery would get 1, or Montgomery would get 2 touchdowns, but Gibbs would 2-1 him on the touches. I think that's going to be right. And so the explosiveness of Gibbs, being able to play over half of his games indoors on the turf, I think is important as well. So we like Montgomery, but this will be Jahmyr Gibbs' backfield next year.
I think the Lions have 14 games indoors again, just with the way the schedule
Great
shakes
for
out,
Jared
just
Goff.
like last year. So amazing for Jared Goff, amazing for their offense, I think, because of particularly what that means for Goff. We'll say with Gibbs, I think that he probably, if David Montgomery stays healthy, he probably doesn't have like number 1 overall player in fantasy type of ceiling, the way that Bijan, Breece, and Christian McCaffrey do, and even the way some of these other guys do. Like, I would say that the average outcome, Jahmyr Gibbs is better than Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams might have more of a chance to be the number 1 overall player in fantasy just because he has more workload kind of upside there, but Gibbs is a safer bet just because of the offense and also the receiving volume.
Yeah, and the other thing is that Jahmyr Gibbs reminds me of somewhat on, not in terms of, from a fantasy perspective, think about Devon Achane last year, and we're going to talk about him in a second here. But Devon Achane was putting up massive fantasy points without massive volume.
Yeah.
I think this is an old school reference, but I think about Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles was always an elite fantasy running back, but he never was a guy that got 25 touches a game. Gibbs is so explosive and has such big play potential that I don't think he is volume-based for his fantasy production. He obviously needs some volume, but he's not a guy that, like, if you tell me, like, he's only getting 15 touches a game versus 20 to 22, where some of these other running backs are, that you're like, well, there's no way Gibbs can do anything with 15 touches.
Yep.
Gibbs can do a lot with 15 touches.
Towards the end of the season, he's making plays in the playoffs as well. Where it's like, is this guy just the best running back in football? Like, it's just like he's playing a different sport.
Yeah, new age Alvin Kamara kind of stuff with Jahmyr Gibbs. And Matthew, you alluded to this. I mean, the same kind of argument can be made for Devon Achane, who he's never going to be the guy in a backfield. But the question is, does he even have to be a top 10 running back in fantasy?
Not for me. You think about the 8 games last year where he just got 10 touches, 10 or more touches. In those 8 games, he averaged 22.9 fantasy points per game. Now, some of that's skewed by like the crazy Denver game. But in those games, he averaged almost 120 yards from scrimmage. Over 20% of his touches went for 10 or more yards. And so Achane, who now he needs to stay healthy, but given the explosiveness of that offense and the fact that he doesn't need to carry the load because they have Raheem Mostert back, because they have Jeff Wilson Jr. there, right? I mean,
Jalen Wright.
They got Jalen Wright as well. So there's guys in that backfield that are going to help carry the load, but the explosiveness of Achane keeps him as the number 1 option, I still believe, on one of the best offenses in football.
Yeah, you talk about guys who look like they're playing a different sport. Achane, that 76-yard touchdown against the Giants where he looks like Usain Bolt in Beijing, like he is playing a different sport when he's out there. But what do you think about his body, Connor? Do you think is built to last through these seasons?
That's my biggest concern. I mean, how many running backs sub 190 can do that. The answer is it's very hard to come up with that list. And the question is, can he be explosive enough in the limited role? He probably can. But I think if you're taking Achane pretty early, you need to really take somebody else in that bottom of that Miami depth chart. I would take Jalen Wright, because I think Wright is the perfect handcuff for either Mostert or Achane, and you'll be fine. Because the offense, Mike McDaniel was the architect of Kyle Shanahan's run games for how long? It's translated since he's a head coach at Miami. So I'm just in on the Miami backfield as a whole. Yep. You just need to be prepared, the fact that they're all injury prone.
Yep. And maybe if you take Devin Achane, you want to come back around and get someone like Rashad White, who has a really high floor, to go with Achane's huge variance.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.